Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Select Board meeting of February 18th. I'm calling the meeting to order with my colleagues Ed Jaworski and Diana Zinal. As is tradition, we'll start the meeting with any announcements anybody may have. Ed, did you have anything? No? Diana?
I have two quick things. One is just a reminder that this Saturday night is Hatfield night at the UMass hockey game. And there's a link to get tickets at a reduced cost. That link can be found on the Hatfield 350th Facebook page, and it can also be found on the Hatfield 350th website. So that'll be great. It'll be all the Hatfield people will be together in one section, so it should be a lot of fun. And the other thing is just this Thursday night, the 20th, is the float building workshop, and I think it starts at 6. And it's here in this room at the fire complex. So for people who were sponsors or whatever and are participating in the parade, there's a workshop about float building.
Great, thank you.
That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, Marlene, did you have anything?
No, I can.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple of things. We did want to make it the official announcement that Bob Flaherty has been sworn in as the fire chief. That was effective on Thursday, February 13th, so congratulations to Bob. Also, we received confirmation from Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito that the town of Hatfield has been awarded a municipal vulnerability preparedness program grant in the amount of $20,000. And that's going to help us complete a community resiliency planning process that will examine the town's vulnerability and strengths and identify priority actions to build resilience as the climate changes. I would like to point out that Marlene Chonsky, our town administrator, led the charge with that and did all the paperwork in the background. So I'd like to thank her and her staff for getting this grant for us. So thank you very much.
Those are all always a lot of work, so congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Lastly, before we go into the public forum, I do want to read the participation guidelines for the town of Hatfield, any of the boards, the public meetings. The Hatfield Select Board welcomes everyone to its meetings and all other public meetings of the town of Hatfield. All regular and special meetings of the boards and committees to the town of Hatfield shall be open and public and shall conform to the open meeting law. Executive sessions are closed to the public and will be held only as prescribed by the statutes of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It is important to recognize that the open meeting law affords the opportunity to listen to the proceedings, but not necessarily participate. During meetings of the Select Board, an attempt will be made to find a balance between hearing from members of the community and conducting the required business of the Hatfield Select Board. All right, so thank you very much. Next order of business are the approval of any minutes that are in our packet.
I'll make a motion that we accept the February 4th, 2020 minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, so a motion's been made and seconded to accept the February 4th, 2020 minutes. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. We're going to go out of order. The next topic of business has to do with discussion of the water and sewer rates, but we'll have a public hearing in about 15 minutes at 6 o'clock regarding that. So I'd like to move on, if it's okay with my colleagues, to discuss the appointments and resignations that we received over the last couple of weeks.
Yes.
Okay, so we did in fact receive a resignation from the Rec Committee from Dave Zanoni. So we would need a motion and a second or we need an approval to accept that, if I may.
I'll make a motion that we accept David Zanoni's resignation with a big thank you to him for the years that he gave to the Recreation Commission. That was
And I'll second that
great.
with regret.
Right.
And I hope we send them a letter of thanks.
I was going to suggest that. So yeah, if we could take care of that, Marlene, send a letter. All right, so motion's made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great, thank you. We also have a request for an appointment to the Board of Registrars in our packet to replace Ruth Kuchip, who has resigned. I think we already accepted that resignation, though, did we not, Lydia? Okay, yeah, that was early in the year. Okay, thank you. So we do have, looking to appoint Teresa Wozniak to that position on the Board of Registrars. There's a motion.
I'll make a motion that we appoint Teresa Wozniak to the Board of Registrars and thank her for wanting to come on board.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion made, seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Just want to thank her for stepping up.
Yep, we appreciate that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Okay,
Let me skip to the,
yeah. Marlene, did you want to talk to, under your report, the topic 3 at this point?
Yes, I
Any
can do that.
either of those?
Financial
Okay.
closure update. So I
Sure.
have been in communication with Justin Cole. He has continued to work on the balance sheet. And I had also consulted with Melanson Heath, who is our new accountant. And we're going to coordinate efforts between Melanson Heath and Justin to get 19 buttoned up. And then just, of course, Monson Heath is currently working on fiscal year 20.
Right.
They'll be reconciling 20.
Right, so, and so what we're doing is we're awaiting the handoff, basically,
Correct.
from Justin over to Monson Heath.
but
Okay.
things are proceeding
Yes,
in a reasonable manner and,
yes,
okay.
yes. So, hopefully we'll have some good news very shortly. I did communicate with the auditor over the weekend. He has penciled Hatfield in for the week of April 27th. We certainly would have liked to have seen them in here sooner. He's booked up, won't be available until the 27th of April. So it puts us pretty close to town meeting.
Yes, it does.
Very close.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be, for him to audit and
Confirm,
audit-
verify.
audit 2019.
Right,
yeah.
okay. And so we're already in his calendar, however.
We are.
So the good news is we're scheduled.
We are.
Right, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then we've got I know we have to declare them surplus, as is our town guidelines, but
So you have in
I'm
your
not sure who
packet.
might want to, unless somebody needs them for parts, but I'll let you mention it, the Jaws of Life.
Right, so this is all related to the old Jaws of Life.
Right.
And that has been replaced, so they no longer have a use for this.
Right.
So I believe, Phil, this will be turned over and put on
The mass.
mass municipal bid,
Okay, so we actually need a vote to declare that as
Yes.
being
please.
surplus property at this point. Okay.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Can I make the motion then, or
Sure.
do you want
would-
me to make the motion, or do you
Make a
want?
motion that we retire the Hearst surplus Hearst hydraulic cutter, Hearst hydraulic spreader, 3 Hearst hydraulic rams, the Honda power unit, 2 power reels with 100 feet each hydraulic holes, 2 50-foot hydraulic hose, and the case with the spreader attachments.
Second.
Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded to declare what the listed Ed just read as surplus property. Is there any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. All right, Marlene, thank you. Still have a few minutes before our scheduled public hearing. Did you want to
To
talk
do this one?
about, is that, I thought that was sort of an FYI.
Oh, okay, maybe we don't have to. Okay.
That we
Yeah,
just
maybe
got
that
hit.
should be when
Yep.
it's finalized.
Right, okay. We can allude to it, though. Marlene, did you want to mention anything under continued old business, by the way?
Well,
So what we're looking at is the 2021 budget and annual town meeting warrant articles. It's that time of year where we all get together and
yeah,
start seeing
there'll
with
be a
various
repeat of this.
departments. Yeah,
Pretty much
correct.
every meeting. So budgets were due last Friday, and they're still trickling in. And I am currently drafting the town meeting warrant articles, and Community Preservation has submitted their recommended articles, and I was going to provide you with a copy of that but I
It's all right,
haven't.
we'll get them at the next meeting. If I may, so by budgets, Marlene's indicating that each department was supposed to have
Department's budget
supplied
submission.
their budget by the end of last week. So the majority are in, but we're still waiting for a few. So I just didn't know if people understood when we said budgets, so that's the only reason I interjected. So,
And a
sorry.
schedule has been set up for the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee to meet with departments March 10th and March 16th.
Right.
Capital projects, you just received that today,
Yes.
I believe. So we can, continue to discuss that.
Right.
And I'm sure, you haven't had a chance to really look that over. Speaking of capital projects, the Council on Aging had submitted for capital to purchase 2 new vans. And they were also aware or looking at potentially acquiring a van through PVTA. They were notified by Representative Lindsay Sabadosa that from time to time PVTA has available surplus vans.
Right.
And the town mechanic and the COA director made a site visit and to look at the vehicle. And they requested from PVTA a copy of the services report, just to, look at what they
Maintenance
could,
records,
maintenance
yep.
records, what they could anticipate, for future
Carfax.
issues or what has been. But anyway, going forward, I understand that they have been in touch with, COA director has been in touch with Phil and the mechanic and would like to acquire the vehicle.
Great.
The mechanic is looking at, painting, putting lettering on the vehicle. Until you actually get it on the road, you're not going to know, what issues, if there are any. They didn't take it out for a test drive. And if I understand, they didn't have plates to do that. That's why they did not.
But the letter says that anything that comes up would be handled through the vehicle maintenance budget, so it would not now need to be an article for town meeting, which is great, capital article.
Correct.
That's great.
Correct.
So Phil, we've received the records from PVTA, but we haven't done the test drive yet? Is that,
That's right, yeah.
all right, so,
Right.
or gone through it yet? Or have we done? Oh, okay,
We're gonna do the general maintenance when we get it.
Right.
When we acquire it, we'll do the brakes and we'll look at,
yeah,
all the other
Okay.
components that might raise a flag and then
Yeah.
just get it painted and lettered and,
okay,
I think it's a win-win. They've been
Yeah.
complaining about that van height of the
Yeah.
van since
Right.
2011.
There is not a cost to the town to acquire the van. The only cost to the town would be to register and insure it.
And then if it needs any repairs, which is
Repair, any future repairs.
which we would have
small
to
in
do.
comparison with the
Right.
purchase or lease of one. Okay.
Okay. Once it's all official, I'm sure Jerry will, but if maybe on behalf of the town or the board, or the DPW, we could also send something to Lindsay Sabadosa thanking her, and the PVTA thanking her for their
So does the
consideration.
board have to accept the donation?
We usually do.
So yes, they would, if that's, okay. that's what
Are we-
they're
are we
doing,
at that point?
Donating it?
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we accept the donation of a Council on Aging van. What is it?
Well, just a 2015, I don't know
Oh,
how
is it a
detailed it has to be.
2015? Is it a wheelchair van, or does it, I guess it doesn't matter, PVTA van, that we accept that donation?
All right, motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, so a motion's made to seconded to accept the PVTA van donation to the Hatfield COA. Is there any further discussion? Ed, Diana?
Nope.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. All right. Why don't we, Marlene, you want to touch on topic 6? You and I spoke a little about, you and I can just talk about this maybe.
Yeah, so I think at our last meeting, we had also let residents know that they may be receiving or may have received communication in the mail from another vendor. and that was not related to the town's
Regarding the power, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
not relative to the power purchase program
Yeah.
that the town has with Dynegy. And I had followed up, actually a resident had sent me what she had received in the mail, and I scanned it and sent it to Colonial Power, who was our
Thank you for doing that.
consultant.
Yep.
And sent an email back, and if you'd just like me to read this.
Sure, so, well, before you do, if you don't mind, so I got the same thing that the resident, I'm sure many residents in this room actually got them, so I received 3 of them, which
Wow.
which got torn up and thrown away. But it makes it confusing for residents, because what you've been receiving in the mail lately has nothing to do with
Right.
the plan we entered into on behalf of the town with Colonial Power. I think now if Marlene reads what she received back from Colonial Power, hopefully it will help clear up any sort of misconceptions
Yeah, I
that
just
might
think
be
it's
out there.
important for residents to know that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The Clean Choice Energy's standard solicitation mailing that you received this is a third-party supplier who we believe targets communities with aggregation. So as you know, we already entered into an aggregation program. I've highlighted some information on page 2. Residents should be very careful because this is a variable rate offer month to month, starting at more than 0.01 cents over the town's aggregation rate. Unfortunately, there is nothing we can do about the third-party suppliers calling residents or sending them solicitations. But if it helps at all with messaging, neither Colonial nor the town supplier will contact a resident unless the resident reaches out first. I also want to confirm that the third-party suppliers do not get residents' addresses from the aggregation. The town supplier is not allowed to sell the mail list per the ESA. And I believe that ESA, I can look that up. I don't know what
That's
that
all
is
right.
off the top of my head. Clean Choice likely pulled the mail list from Eversource a while back, knowing the aggregation was launching in the near future. And if anybody has any questions, they can contact me. I have a copy of, the communication that residents received, and I can sort of direct them to, where they can look on their mailing if they're
Right.
interested. And
Okay, thank you. So,
This is frustrating because all of this is confusing enough as it is for people.
Right. And so most people would
So
think-
then you add this on and it's really
Right.
frustrating.
right,
Was when this came out, all I did was call Eversource. They were wonderful on the phone. They said, we don't care who uses a third-party carrier, you're still an Eversource customer.
that's right, yeah.
And the woman was so helpful, she said, actually, our rates are going up. And she was really, she said, take the lower rate. She said, it doesn't hurt Eversource, it doesn't bother us.
Right.
And it's just the way the pricing is done. So if you don't want to take the lower rate, you're still going to have the same provider, same service, same everything. I mean, I applaud you guys for what you did. It's going to, I figure it's going to save 15, 20, 25, 30 bucks a year or something, but that's okay. And she said, we're going up on our rates anyway, on the
they are.
transmission rates, so.
This is a little different. This is somebody else, but,
Yeah, this is a third party
Yeah.
trying to cut in and scare people, but if people are concerned, just call Eversource.
Yes,
They're
they can do
very
that.
helpful.
All right.
They really are.
Thanks, Joe.
It's just the timing of
yeah,
it,
it is
and that's,
confusing.
yeah.
yeah.
And Ed or Diana, do you have any questions of Marlene regarding
Nope, I'm
that
good.
particular
We should
topic?
probably get to her.
Yep.
Yep.
So, all right, at this time, we will be having our public hearing regarding the proposed water and sewer rate increase. I'm just going to read what was in the newspaper. The Board of Selectmen will hold a public meeting and accept comments on Tuesday, February 18th, 2020 at 6 p.m. in the William A. Belden Training Room, Emergency Service Building, located behind Memorial Town Hall, for the purpose of considering an increase in the water and sewer rates as a result of a water and sewer rate study. So with us this evening, we do have the water and sewer consultants with us who are going to present an overview and answer any questions that anybody here may have. This is a public hearing. It's called to order. And so I would ask either Dave or James or however, and Eric's here, by the way, from our water department as well, how you'd like to proceed. Pardon?
Sewer.
Sewer, excuse me.
Department.
Been called worse.
Water, sewer, you know.
Wastewater. You say
Wastewater
Nice,
treatment plant.
yeah.
Extraordinaire, how's that? Okay, so we are going to discuss, we had an overview back a few weeks ago regarding the study that was completed on the town's behalf. And at that time, we discussed having the public hearing, and, you know, notices have been out, it's been in the newspaper, it's on the website, there's been a lot of talk and chatter. And more often than not, the best way of answering the questions is to get together and answer the questions. So that's why we're here. We're gonna I'm gonna turn it over to Dave and James and Eric, I guess. Perhaps it's gonna be similar to the last overview we had. I think we've all gotten some more information since then from a board perspective and the town perspective, but we want the townspeople and the residents to hear what it's all about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
So just by way of introduction, formality, Dave Prickett with DPC Engineering. I'm joined this evening by James Rivers, who works with me, Eric Meals from Wastewater Department, and Phil Genovese, DPW Director. So between the four of us, hopefully we can answer any questions that the public may have. We'll try to do a brief presentation. As Brian alluded to, we'd like to keep this as informal as possible in terms of, you know, getting input from the public. But I'll start off by being the bad guy. Anytime we're here doing a rate hearing, talking about raising rates, it's always a sensitive topic. But if we just kind of look at the two sides independently, we start with wastewater, that's probably the more challenging of the two, so we'll start there. As you may or may not know, Hatfield invested in doing a wastewater management plan to identify current needs, limitations, et cetera, over the next 20 years. So that's the basis for why we're here this evening. To put things in perspective, you have a treatment plant that is built in 1980, early 80s, over 40 years old, or approaching 40 years old. A collection system, the sewer pipes that are under the roads, many of which that are probably pushing 100 years in some locations, but it's a system that's mature. Not surprisingly, this is New England, so it's old infrastructure. If you were to reconstruct your entire system today, you'd be looking at a capital cost of about $110 million to build a treatment plant in your pipes. So the town of Hatfield and its residents own a major asset, and that asset in some cases is in need of upgrades and modernization, but nevertheless it is a key and vital element of the town's infrastructure. One of the things that we'll talk about a little bit this evening, and James will get into some details in a second, is that historically over the last 5 years, the wastewater budget has generally been, I'll say, just underfunded. So as the town has gone through the budgeting process, wastewater costs have outpaced general inflation year to year. Annual wastewater inflation in Massachusetts is about 7% a year. It's really, there are a lot of factors that contribute to it. A shortage of qualified operators, the costs associated with sludge disposal. Needless to say, there are a lot of things that you can't control your own destiny. So those costs tend to go up. Historically, you've increased your budget by about 2%. So you can understand over the course of 3, 4, 5 years how the budget needs versus actual has resulted in a deficit. Relative to the capital plan that was identified in the wastewater management plan project, we identified approximately $32 million in capital needs over the next 20 years. Of which approximately 10 to 12 million are near-term, mostly related to the treatment plant, and some related to your pump stations. But for the most part, the plan is to selectively improve your pipes over time, little by little, year to year, and that's a pretty sustainable process. One other item to consider this evening as we talk about sewer rates, we talk about capital costs, is that the annual construction inflation, similar to the O&M inflation, is a little over 4% a year. So the cost to build treatment plants and pump stations, there's a pretty narrow pool of qualified contractors that work in that realm. Costs are driven by things, again, that we can't control, the cost of steel, concrete, fuel, and thus the cost to build treatment plant. We've seen over the last 20 years annual inflation over 4%, which is not quite double, but at least 50% higher than general inflation. When we start to talk about where your sewer rates are, and where we recommend that they be, one of the main drivers is that the town of Hatfield, along with many of our Western Mass neighbors, we have limited availability and opportunities to secure long-term, low-interest loans together with grants of any size and significance for projects like this. Now, Hatfield actually has a very good track record in years past of securing grants, whether it be the Route 5 project, and I think there may be others outside the water wastewater realm that I'm not aware of, but relative to major water wastewater projects, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, its Rural Development Program, is going to be the town's best bet to secure with the combination of a long-term low-interest loan and a grant for this project. In order to do so, USDA has a series of underwriting criteria that they use in evaluating prospective projects and clients, in your case, the town of Hatfield. Based on where your rates are right now, Hatfield would not receive a grant for a capital project of this magnitude. What we are recommending this evening is a 25% rate increase on the wastewater side, and the main driver in that is to position Hatfield to have the best chance to go secure USDA loan and grant for the capital projects that are emerging. And I will preface this by saying that your DPW, your town administrator, certainly your wastewater superintendent, which I say tongue-in-cheek, have really been working hard to acknowledge that there are capital needs, but bring those costs down. Just last week, Eric and Ken met with the DPC team to try to peel the onion and skinny things up as best we can. Now, you could talk about whether the magnitude of the project is 8 million or 12 million, but whether it's A or B, the town of Hatfield still needs to position themselves, in our opinion and recommendation, to be able to go secure those loans and grants. And that's really the only major funding source that's out there. So with that, James will get into the details of the proposed rate increase for sewer. And there are handouts here for anyone in the public that hasn't had a chance to grab a copy.
So just to, piggyback on what Dave said and get a little more into detail on how we determined the recommended 25% rate increase. In parallel to developing the wastewater management plan, in which we identified the $32 million in total capital and the 10 to 12 million in near-term capital, we decided to look at the rates. We always like to take our financial approach in parallel to the engineering. That way we know the impact to the town and the residents before we start planning for a project. So what we did was we looked at your budget over the past 2 years. The town has made a huge effort to document, where every penny is going and the spending in each of their budgetary categories. So we looked at those as opposed to what was actually being spent. And when we did that, we saw that you're currently underfunding your budget by approximately 10 to 20% each year. So the budgeting process, as it's being done, you're ended up spending more throughout the year in wastewater. And much of this is due to equipment maintenance and emergency repairs. So the first step we took was increasing the budget to meet those needs. On top of that, we also looked at the impact of the proposed capital, and we started with a 5-year window with the rates, and then we narrowed it down to a 3-year window and determined what the rates necessary would be to secure grants and also position the townspeople to pay for the proposed capital. So there's 2 approaches we initially took in planning for the rates. We looked at even increases over a 3-year period, as well as a step increase with lower increases in the subsequent years. And when we looked at it that way, we determined that in order to become eligible for a potential grant for USDA, we would need to take the leap in the first year with a 25% increase. If we looked at doing 3 even increases, we would not meet the 1% threshold of the median household income. And that's why we proposed the 25% grant. This equates to approximately 10% per month per residential user, in addition to the current sewer rate. So it's about $120 per year increase to the sewer rates. This is the first rate increase that would be necessary to fund the project, but it is the largest increase. In future years, we would be looking at approximately 10 to 12% per year over the next 2 years, and then we would be positioned for more modest increases like the town has traditionally seen from 2 to 4% to keep up with the annual inflation on the wastewater side. So that will cover the initial leap needed to potentially secure the USDA funding. However, it will not be the only rate increase that we would be looking at. as the project moves forward.
Okay, John. So I think it's important for the people here in the audience and the people at home is I think we all hear a 25% rate increase and you immediately, kind of start freaking out a little bit and because that's a high percentage rate. But as James just alluded to, for the average homeowner, and it's an average, it's approximately $120 a year or $10 a month. If you want to break it down. So I just wanted to try to put that in somewhat of a perspective. None of us like costs going up, but we're a business. The town's a business, and we need to take care of our infrastructure and look to the future. So again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just really wanted to once again say, so everybody understands that the 25% increase is roughly for an average water and sewer user, $120 a year, roughly.
And just, so, we would need to do all of this work anyway, and if we do it in conjunction with the rate increase, then we qualify for grants and low-interest loans. So it's sort of,
Yeah, right.
We
Good point.
Hatfield qualifies. I think we don't want to mislead the town that there's never any guarantees with a grant program. They're subject to a lot of political
but
things.
we
that
wouldn't qualify at our
we
current
would.
rate
I
structure.
think the rationale, to add to your point, is that if Phil was to go borrow money with Marlene tomorrow, for every $1 million that you'd borrow using conventional funding, you'd pay back the loan on a 20-year note at $60,000 per year. Okay? Through USDA, they offer a 40-year note and the poverty interest rate, which is great. They can call it whatever they want, but right now it's 1.625% for 40 years. So there you're looking at about $42,000 per million financed per year as your mortgage payment. And if you factor in even a modest grant at 25%, it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio. So you could be paying $60,000 per year per million financed, or you could be paying 30, which is 75% of 40. So it's literally, the mortgage cost is half per year. And yes, you do pay it longer, but for communities that have been in similar situations, this is really the only chance you have is to make a good faith effort up front and then work really hard and hustle to try to get that grant.
I just want to add that I don't have it here, but I know there was an email from a resident questioning the USDA qualifications.
Yeah.
Is there, I just want to make sure that who wasn't able to be here tonight, but that email can be answered so that we can make.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and I did see the email, and USDA does have the two firm guidelines that the population is less than 10,000 and that the median household income is below the state average for the median household income to qualify for the funding. The 1% of median household income relates to the grant, and while it's not something that's specifically set in stone by USDA, just based on conversations, it's a very competitive program. USDA, particularly for their grant funding, it's a relatively limited pool of money they get on an annual basis, and there's only so much money that's provided at the national level. So if a community is not at the 1%, they won't consider the grant funding typically. So it's really an important metric to be at that level in order to secure grant funding.
As long as we
And
can just
I'd
make
like-
sure she gets an answer.
I'd like to add one thing, is right now, money is there. We don't know if under the next election, the money goes away. So right now, our best shot is trying for it, and if the money's there, if we want to go that route. That's all I'm saying.
USDA has a pretty amazing team in place right now, as good as I've seen in my career, and they've really come to bat for your neighboring communities. Orange and Deerfield have had good success recently, and those officials in Amherst and the regional offices for USDA have worked hard for their local constituents, so.
Can I ask a question? The 25% increase, is that just for operational costs and administrative costs?
So the 25% increase will cover operational, administration, and the beginning phases of the project. It's not going to cover the entire project, but it's the first step towards planning. That way,
So it's pre-planning for capital?
And for the capital, a portion of the capital. That way, we're not looking at one increase 3 years down the road when the project's
The 25%
complete.
increase is just gonna be for operational, basically.
No, and it'll cover capital as well.
It's three things.
If you borrow money, you're gonna allocate some of this money towards capital.
The soft costs on it, yeah.
What about the hard costs of the borrowing and stuff like that?
Well, that'll come later. I mean, in the initial year, if the public and the select board choose to make the proposed adjustment, it would cover three things as I would describe them. One would be adequately funding the O&M. Two would be addressing the soft costs associated with pursuing the grants and loans, conceptual design, et cetera. And three is it would put that money into the retained earnings. You have an enterprise fund now, and as you incur those costs for subsequent phases of the project into design, you'll have some of those monies, available. So it's a leap of faith for sure.
Also, you brought up the figures, used $1 million, correct?
Yep.
Well, you're proposing $12 million for 3 years.
Yeah, you can do the math pretty linearly, but it's
Right.
it's 50 cents on the dollar for every dollar you borrow in terms of how you pay it back. So I think it's pretty easy to see the potential gain. And if you don't get a grant down the road, you have decisions to make. You may be in a position where your rates are stable for a longer period of time, but I think whether you implement a project or in the case if you didn't receive grants, fast forward 5 years down the road, you just want to always make sure that your annual rate increases on both water and sewer
Yep, cover
are,
the-
are covering the crazy inflation that we see in the business.
Right.
Yep.
If we don't get grants, correct, and we go ahead with projects which, sound pretty good, for sewer and water, how do the Bill and the Board of Selectmen propose to fund that?
Well, I think it would have to be a phased project. I don't think you could take the whole $8 million, what we're proposing, and do it all at once
We're
without,
talking 12, Phil.
well, I think we're gonna cut the 12 down a little bit. I think it's like, the conversations I've been having with Eric and
Okay.
with Dave, 8 to 10 million is reasonable. So it would probably be, like I said, a phased project, and hopefully that the retained earnings you'd have enough built up in retained earnings to pay for the loan. I don't see no other way you could do it.
And it's, we're trying to be aggressive about making sure we do get those grants.
Right, I understand that.
That's part of the point of the increases.
Mike?
Yeah, so I have a question. I have absolutely no qualms whatsoever about the need for capital upgrades to our sewage treatment plant and our sewer infrastructure. There's no question that we need to do that at some point. And to the extent that we can qualify for this USDA loan/grant program, all the better. I guess my question, Dave, and to the select people here, is I wonder whether we already qualify for that grant and loan hurdle level from the USDA. In other words, as I understand it, we've got USDA's hurdle rate is at 1% of average residential income, median household here in Hatfield. And you guys have calculated based on some costs that you've come up with, and I'd like to have you share more about those costs, quite frankly. But you've gathered some cost information, and that calculation is based on a numerator and a denominator, the numerator being the cost, the denominator I have a question about as well. But nevertheless, you've come up with this $454 of average residential sewer costs in Hatfield. So I guess my question is, and I asked you this at the last meeting, have we fully loaded that numerator, that cost level in that fraction, if you will? Have we included all of the debt service related to the sewer function in town? Have we included all the indirect costs that are currently being paid out of taxation to support our sewer function in the community? Namely, we have vehicles that we're renting that are currently in the DPW budget. We have people that we're paying that that are currently in the highway department, who are used to support the sewer department from time to time. I mean, you could make an argument that, with the exception of the school budget, there is a portion of every single dollar from taxation in this town that goes to support the sewer department. So what I'm wondering about is, have we included all of those dollars? And if we do, would we then qualify for this hurdle rate? Which would mean that we could apply for this loan grant program sooner rather than later. So I guess that's question number one. What are the costs that we can include in that calculation? And have we included every cost that we can include? The other is, when you
Why don't we
say,
let him answer that one?
okay,
Yeah,
that's question.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, because there's a lot that was touched on. The way Hatfield has traditionally done business is sewer capital is put on the taxation.
Yep.
That's the way the town has done it in the past. The proposed project would be putting the capital on the sewer users. As far as the eligibility for grant and loan funding, the numerator and the denominator aren't really what USDA is looking at. What they're looking at is what your sewer rate is and what your flows are, your consumption. So they're going to look at what the average flows are from a household, and they're going to look at the rate for those flows, and they're gonna determine the average cost. It doesn't have anything to do with the budget necessarily and where the money is allocated. It's based on the sewer rate and the flows.
But Jim, this is Jim, right?
Yeah.
But this graph that you handed out, this calculation, this doesn't show anything about flows.
So
It
up in-
talks about cost per household.
Yep, so up in the,
So this is my other question. Is this a sewer, is it per sewer household, or is it per?
it's per sewer household. It's not based on the entire town. It's
And there's
just
787
sewer users.
households on sewer at this point.
Do we know
Okay,
how,
so if that's the case, I just want to get, if I can have one more minute.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I took some numbers from this current year's fiscal budget from the town. We, and Marlene, you can check on this at some point, our total sewer enterprise operating expense budget for fiscal '20 was $255,000, okay? Our total sewer enterprise debt, principal and interest, was $178,000. This is from our current budget. You total that, that's $433,000. If you divide that by the 767 households that are on sewer, that comes to $564 per household, which exceeds the USDA's 1% median household limit. So my contention is, why raise our rates? And not that I'm against raising rates, but why raise our rates to meet that hurdle if we already meet it?
The debt's paid by taxation, so it's not paid by the 787, it's gonna be paid by the entire net
Well, it's
tax
paid from, by
rate.
some of that
They don't
787.
look at the budget, so we can't take, unfortunately, we can't take credit for anything that's on the general fund. So it's strictly what is on the sewer rate, or water rate if it was a water project. That's it. That's what they used to go by. So, and it is harder for those communities where there's a split or capital is on the user relative to USDA. It's just, every entity has their own
Guideline.
rules, and as James said, they have some kind of black and white things with population and median household income, and then they have underwriting criteria that are gray. But relative to anything that's on the general fund, I don't disagree with you that the net cost per sewer household is higher than what the rate shows, but that doesn't get you any traction with USDA relative to the costs.
So if we move all of those indirect expenses from taxation to the sewer enterprise fund, then we would qualify right away.
And your debt service,
Yeah.
you'd be closer to it, but
Well, we'd be, according to my numbers, we'd be,
I was gonna
we'd
say,
be in
well,
excess
rates
of
would
it.
have to go up like double or triple.
he's asking that.
Yeah.
He's asking that.
No,
Well-
because then it would go up double or triple.
I have to get in here. Usually Mike and I are on a different side of the page, and on this one, we're kind of on the same page. I'm not a sewer user. I'm a septic user. 2/3 of the town is still on septic, I believe, correct?
Yeah.
And we're paying the taxes And we have been paying the taxes on the sewer project since 1982. And we, up to about 2 years ago, we got use out of it because we had to pump our septic by ordinance into the sewer plant. Then you couldn't take it. So right now, the people who aren't on the sewer, the septic people, are getting no benefit from the sewer.
I mean, I would disagree with that comment. but-
Okay, well, why do you disagree?
Well, does your sewage treatment plant carry the cost of any development that happens in town that's connected to it? And the economic development, Route 5, between the Northampton line and Church Street, I don't think any of that would happen if you didn't have a treatment plant. So I mean, I get that there's two different, feelings.
Right, but I
about it.
understand, I'm not trying to,
Everybody wins from having a treatment
but
plant.
I'm not trying to, knock this down. What I'd like to see, I'd like to see some effort, Joe, put out there for the people who aren't on septic, a little bit more services from the sewer department. Can't we pump, we're trucking our stuff to Montague right now, I believe.
Hatfield will never, in my opinion, receive septic at the wastewater plant.
So we'll
again.
continue as a non-sewer,
It shouldn't have before, to be quite
but we
honest.
also had a promise back in 1982, we're gonna try to, sewer the whole town. We didn't quite get there.
So, I
But
guess
some of
my
this
point-
work positions us ultimately to expand the system.
Right.
And part of this also is to make sure that sewer users are paying sewer costs and not you or me, or I don't know who else is in the room who's not on sewer.
But I guess what I hear you guys saying is that to qualify for this grant, it's really an accounting issue. I mean, if in our fiscal '21 budget, we moved all of the sewer principal and interest, and we took 25% of Phil and 25% of the highway department, and fully loaded it, put it into sewer enterprise, and divided that by the number of households, we would come up with a number that's exceeding the USDA's hurdle rate, and would be able to qualify right away to apply for that loan grant program.
You would need to raise your rates.
Why would we need to raise the rate?
You still
Because-
haven't addressed the adequate funding of the O&M piece. But you would, I understand what you're saying relative to having the debt service be on the user fees, having the indirect cost be on the user fees, the increase to O&M that we've talked about that's
They'd
an
go up a
element of
lot
the
more than
proposed.
25%.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Joe.
You could still be at a deficit, and the townspeople, the taxation pays for it now, it operates at a deficit. So, I mean, I don't, it's just a.
I don't know how you can, quite honestly, make a change to how debt service is paid for a project that was previously appropriated and voted by the residents. And I don't know what that debt is tied to, so, but I'm sure it was a project that when the voters, the residents voted on it, it said how the debt was gonna be paid for at the time, so I think that's fair to say.
Joe?
Many 50 years ago, when I came to this town, we were just putting in a pollution system. And everybody thought, God, how are we gonna afford this, and what's the gain? We had a river that was so polluted that they thought it would take 50 years to get up to a grade B river. It got there in 25 years. That river is an example of what this is all about. That river is so clean, everybody enjoys it. Probably too many people, but it's a lifeline of this town and a lot of people. But also, we've gotten 40 years out of this thing. And you talk about these numbers, it's $2.17 a week. I'm on the sewer. To tell me that to help get this continuing forward for the next generation when I'm long gone, I'm going to spend $2.17 a week to put us in position to get some government help, and I hope we do, to be able to flush my toilets, use my sink, use my dishwasher anytime I want, as much as I want. God, what a luxury that is for $2.17 a week. So not bad at all. And I really applaud you guys for trying to find ways to help us get there while interest rates are so low. God knows how long they're going to stay there. But I don't understand all of the past accounting that the town did for the way we budgeted and we broke it up. We did it, I used to be on finance, we did it because we grew and we knew, that's what we knew at the time. But I think, I watched your last meeting and I just was here because I just think you guys are trying to help us tiptoe through this. And I don't know of any easy way to do it, but we've used this system for 40 years. And I know you guys work really hard at keeping it running very, very efficiently. So, as a sewer user, For $2.17 a week, that's the lowest price increase I've seen of anything I buy in my budget. So that's my 2 cents. Well, but you can look at the 25%, but it's $2.17 a week.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
not
you can,
arguing-
right.
Again, I'm not arguing whether we need to do all of this, because we absolutely do. I'd just like to see us be able to do it as soon as we can. And if our rates, if we already
Well,
qualify
if we
because of the way we.
set the
that's why
rates,
we're
what's
here.
holding us up,
No,
right?
that's
If
the-
we vote to set the rates, there's nothing holding us up.
Diane, with
Right.
the new budget that I put in for this next fiscal year coming up, what we're bringing in through the sewer rate increase will pay for our grant and loan application and get us going in that direction. So,
With no holdup.
with no holdup, and it'll
Well,
be,
we have to wait at least one accounting year in order to show the USDA that those, the actual numbers such as we,
no,
we don't?
No, you just gotta show them the vote for the rate.
yeah.
For the rate increase?
You just have to show
Have
them
that
the
tomorrow if we
townspeople
can get
are
moving.
in- the town is doing this.
Is behind it,
willing to do
yeah,
this.
absolutely.
Again, I have no qualms about the increase. Like I said, I'm not even I'm not worried about the increase, but I'm worried about the capital items. 8 million, well, when I came in here tonight, it was 12 million, and then there's 6 million for the water. That's $18 million. That's more than you spent building 2 schools. You know, I just want to put that on the table. The impact overall to the town is going to be tremendous. You're seeing it happen in Northampton, you're seeing it happened in East Hampton, it's going to happen here.
But if I may,
It's going to happen.
and as was.
And what's the alternative?
Right. and
Not
what-
do it?
And what was said in the beginning was, this was, as you guys remember, because you're always there, this was a town meeting vote a couple years ago to do the water and sewer study. Here we are getting the results of the study. And to Joe's point, these gentlemen are presenting us, the select board, the town, with our options. I mean, the 40-year-old plant isn't getting any younger, right? So the pipes aren't getting any better. I mean, every time we fix a broken pipe, it's from 18-something or the early 1900s. I mean, I hear you, John, but that's part of, it's the cost of doing business in a town. And let me tell you, you guys have all been on the finance committee. We're sitting here as select board members potentially recommending a 25% increase. Not easy to do, but our job isn't to do what's easy. Our job is to do what makes sense to keep moving the town forward. And that's what we have to do.
Right, we have an obligation to make sure that we're not just putting out fires, but that we're being proactive about this stuff.
Absolutely.
And positioning ourselves to be in the best possible standing to get these grants and low-interest
But
loans.
you guys are also working, you and all the other boards are working on growth in this town in various ways.
Right.
Right.
And with the Route 5 project, you're going to be adding more people, or more places will have the ability to tie in.
Exactly.
Every time we grow, that spider web grows. And I'm sorry, there's some people that live a little farther out, and we don't have those grants to help tie up sewer and water. I wish they did. We all feel bad for those that can't.
I'll probably never have sewer at my house, but.
Well, don't say that, because I think that's where this all leads. And John, I'm hoping that this community finally does with this sewer strategy, if you will, and develops a sewer plan that extends the sewer eventually to all non-sewer users. And, you know, hopefully that can happen sooner rather than later. But we need a financial strategy
Right.
to deal with it so that it's affordable. That's the,
In my opinion, this is step one in that financial strategy.
You're almost there to North Hatfield, but you've got up to West Hatfield. But I also want to, I don't see anybody from, well, other than Lydia, maybe from West Hatfield, and well, you're still there. With Dad you are, and your sister.
He thought he'd never see the sewer system.
Right. We haven't seen it yet either. In regard to the, West Hatfield project, you got the, $2.5 million? What is the total project? I was kind of fuzzy. What's the total project to get that? 3.6. Route 5.
3 points.
Okay, so we got the 2.5 from the government. Where's the other 900,000?
You have $2 million grant from the, so you need 1.6 million.
And where's that going to come from?
what do you think?
Oh. Okay. And what about hookup?
It'll be,
Well, what about
it'll be an
hookup?
article
It'll be an article.
at town meeting.
What about hookup fees? What's it going to charge each user out there to
It's
hook up?
$1,000
$1,000.
to hook into.
Has
the sewer.
anybody, I don't know, has anybody, do you have estimates of what some of these households will have to do to knock in their septic and hook in on their own property?
Well, they were all, not all, we had a majority of the residents out there at our first meeting of 2 years ago or a year and a half
Are they aware of the
ago.
cost of that hooking up on their side?
Yep.
Yeah, I really don't know what the cost
If
is.
you put a new
past, this is
septic
probably
system,
something
it's
that the
$25,000,
DPW
$30,000.
and Selectmen could consider, but in the past, when we extended the sewer line in town, while that was being extended, we did offer residents at that point the ability to tie into the sewer at no charge.
Correct.
Okay, so that might be something that, you know, our leadership would be willing to consider, John.
All Plantation Acres, Plantation Road, that was all free hookups. Main Street was all free. There could be some consideration to the people in West Hatfield.
Right, they just had to pay for the construction and the laying of the pipe from the house to the,
Right.
to the main.
Right.
Right.
So, because on top of you're going to ask them to pay for the 1.6?
Well, I mean, the point is to incentivize people to want to tie in, so
Right.
I'm certainly open to that
Well, I mean, the
suggestion.
cost,
You talk to the people on, that say you bring it in, I'll tie in. They're
Right.
happy to tie in.
Yep.
They're
Well, I mean,
more
like,
than.
you know, like Dave had said, that the cost of tying into, into the sewer is a lot less than putting in a new septic field.
Oh,
So,
oh, yeah.
you know.
And you never have to worry about it
You've got
again.
people just past Roxborough
Or
saying,
you're
why not?
pumping it out, as you were
All of it.
mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
So getting back to the hearing,
Yeah.
if you don't mind. So I didn't want, the question started, and I don't know if James was actually finished, or if the presentation was finished when the question started, or if anybody here has any more questions regarding the wastewater treatment plant that haven't been addressed yet or answered, or if there's anything else you guys wanted to say, or if not, that's fine too. I guess one of the last things I want to say is I just want to reiterate that the 25% figure, 25%, sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. It's a high percentage, but when you do the dollars and cents of the average homeowner on sewer, it's a couple bucks, it's a few dollars a week, and that's nothing to sneeze at, but it's not, 25%, it ends up being about $120 or $125 a year, and I think that's important for people to understand. So, basically $10 a month, that's roughly. Joe?
We've also gone so long these last few years with this budget mess to try to, we couldn't spend anything to catch up.
Right.
And it's a breath of fresh air to at least see us being proactive and saying, okay, we've suffered, we've gone through the pain, but it's time to build forward. And it's not a crisis stage, it's planning stages, which is far better than crisis.
It is
Nobody
indeed.
likes operating a town in a crisis.
Yes, Ed?
The way I see it, there's three options. One, we can kick the can down the road and maybe in 5 and 10 years do it, but that cost will be astronomical at the 4.3% per year. So you'd be talking another, instead of 12 million, you'd be talking 16, 18 million. And then we could pass on that debt to the next generation, make them fix the plant, which is the wrong thing to do.
And not have
Because we
grants?
want to make sure that what we leave the next generation, we've taken care of because it's our turn. Second, we could go for a 20-year loan at 3 or 5% at the full 12 million. And third, we could go for the USDA loan at 40 years with the grant and pay even less over the 40-year period. So it's got to be done eventually. So what is the cheaper cost right now? The cheaper cost is trying to go for the USDA loan and then hopefully we can continue each generation keep adding on to that sewer extension because we're doing West Street. We got a study possibly under the capital planning to keep going to 5 and 10. I mean, it's in pieces. So, I mean, that's just what I want to say, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, this generation or next generation, what do we want to do to the next generation? I mean, we got to think about that. Just
Great.
my opinion.
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay.
Diane, did you have?
We didn't talk about the water part. Okay, so We should get back to that, maybe.
Yeah, that's, yep.
Well, that part is much less painful.
Yeah, it's, we're looking, the water's, similar drivers to the sewer is adequately funding the budget and looking at proposed capital. As far as the water rates based on the size of the water system, the capital planning and debt service, we're looking at about a 5% increase this year and maintaining that over the next few years to fund the proposed $6 million in capital. And that's just based on traditional financing. We're not looking at USDA on the water side.
And the water's lower because over the years, there's been a lot of work on the water side. We're now in the last phase of the water line to get that infrastructure
Yeah,
taken
you
care
did your
of.
big
so-
stuff, your treatment plant, your transmission lines, I mean,
Yep, it's mostly
always be pipes to fix.
replacing pipes is
Yeah.
what's mostly proposed and some work at the well. But you also have a larger user base allowing for a lower.
And again, to put that in perspective, the 5% comes out to about $1.70 per month for the average user. Again, very affordable, I think. Less than $2 a month.
Yep.
That one
said might be.
was easier. What's that?
Did anybody have any, before we close the public hearing, did anybody have any other comments regarding the wastewater treatment plant or the water?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So.
And thank you for coming.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so,
I do want to thank you because you've been here quite a few times and you've been able to provide us a lot of information to help us
Yeah.
guide us through this, so I appreciate that.
Our pleasure, you've got a really good team.
yeah,
And
All right,
putting it
thank
in a way that townspeople will understand and breaking those rates down. It's really important.
Eric helps take the engineer out of the
Thank you,
the
Eric.
speech, yeah.
okay.
Well, Dave even
Right.
went further and said it's 33 cents a day, so.
Who did?
Hey,
33 cents a day.
You don't break it down too far, yeah.
Okay, so seeing no more questions or having any more information regarding that, we will close the public hearing. Okay? So, thank you again.
Do we vote on them tonight?
We can. I'm good with
I'm
that.
ready to vote on
Okay.
it. Are you ready to vote on it?
Yeah, yeah,
You want me to make a motion?
sure,
So are they here, the new rates?
yes. Well, as presented, but however you want to do
Okay.
it.
I will make a motion that we change the water and sewer rates as proposed in this handout and as discussed at the hearing.
So the motion's made, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor? Aye. Great. Thank you.
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you very
James.
much.
Thank you, guys. We actually have one more
We just have one more agenda item, right?
agenda item, and that's about Town Hall, if you don't mind. So, thank you, everybody at home. Thank you again, guys. We appreciate it. So, getting back to our agenda post-public hearing, our last topic, unless we have any unanticipated new business, would be a Town Hall renovation update. I don't know, Phil, Ed, Marlene, if one of you would like to.
Well, we managed to get through last week.
I know, how'd
Employees
that go?
worked remotely. They're,
Didn't go well, how about that?
Say it again?
I said, I don't think it went very well.
Oh.
We were supposed to be there for the whole week and they worked 2 out of 5 days, so.
Due to,
Well, this was the contract. The contract, that's the contractor's issue. And the general
Okay.
contractor told the subcontractor, we shut down for a week for you. If you only worked a few days, that's your problem because now you're going to have to decide how to get the job done around our schedule.
okay, that's fair. I mean, that's how it should be. you know.
right, the architect and the general contractor communicates with the town representatives, and then what transpires between the subcontractors
Understood.
and them. And there was some,
So I guess the
communication.
question I would ask you guys is, so are they going to work around us? Has that been determined yet? We don't need to close again
The
to,
only thing that I can see now is that if, once they start going into offices, you might have to.
well, what was communicated to me this morning was that we had anticipated that they would be working in offices. and
Right.
There would be
Yeah, that's
limited
what I thought.
access.
Yeah.
What was communicated to me this morning is that they are pretty much, the work is targeted downstairs this week.
Okay.
And on Friday, which Town Hall is closed on Friday anyway, they will be installing the sprinkler heads in some of the offices.
Back
They'll be
upstairs.
popping, yes.
Okay,
They
so
will
they're
be popping-
downstairs for the majority of this week.
Of
This
this week,
meeting's on the
right.
18th. And then on Friday, they'll move upstairs while the offices are vacant, because nobody
Friday
should be
and-
there, because
yeah.
town hall's closed, to put in the sprinkler heads, yes?
Yep.
Did I say that right?
That's what was communicated
Synopsis,
to me
okay.
this morning. And I understand it can be frustrating because, we're communicating with the architect and the GC on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And then there's other
It's construction, so
Yeah.
stuff happens.
That stuff does happen.
But it doesn't
But it
mean it's
is
not
unfortunate that we
right.
inconvenienced our employees and inconvenienced our residents.
Yes.
And didn't accomplish what we thought we would accomplish through that inconvenience. That's unfortunate.
Right.
Yeah.
So on Friday, when they do that, will they then, the beginning of next week, the week of the 24th, have an update, give you guys an update as to where we stand on a go forward,
We'll have an
how many
update
they
on
finish on
Thursday.
Friday?
They
Because
supply
you
us
won't be
with a-
there,
With a
right?
weekly schedule of what they're gonna do within the next couple of weeks, so.
And that changes.
Well, that's what I was going to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
right.
So when they.
When does it get locked
So-
in, ever?
The schedule we had received for last week changed last
Yep.
week.
Okay.
Well,
Hey,
This is the biggest part of the project, really.
It
It
is.
really is, because it puts everybody out that has to work in their offices, where the elevator was just confined in that space, but this is through the whole building, so. Once they get out of that first floor, where the offices are, upstairs, there's nobody, and downstairs, there's nobody, so. Just a matter
So we're
of-
getting there.
We're getting.
I mean, the good news is, kidding aside, we're getting there, but there's been some frustrations along the way, shall I say?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of recourse for that kind of lack of performance or?
No, I think I think the contract holds to an end date, and if the subs, eventually if the subs don't supply the end date, then there's recourse, but as of now, they might come in here Friday with 20 guys and knock it out, we don't know.
Right. I think the frustrating thing to Diana and Marlene, to all of our points, is it's just you plan according
That's-
to the schedule.
Yeah.
And then the schedule changes, but we have to hold true to our plan, right?
That's right.
That- On our end,
and
because.
frankly, we're
that's,
asking a
know.
lot of our employees.
Yeah.
It's been very disruptive to them, and they deserve a big thank you for their patience.
I agree.
There is
all
a lot of
you.
planning that goes
And-
because we need
and
access
to some
our-
extent, I'm sure residents have been inconvenienced, and that's never a good feeling, right?
Wait, you guys can move back in there and then they're gonna be.
Okay.
Was there any more update on it other than
Now,
that?
there's always one subcontractor on every project that marches to a different drummer. That's what happens, hopefully it doesn't happen, it all gets worked out. But if they don't produce, they're not getting their money, and
Yep.
if they have to do certain amount of the project in order to get their
Yeah.
pay. They don't get the full amount, they get a percentage based on how much they've
Work
installed.
completed, yeah.
I mean, I understand that the subcontractor is the problem, but the general contractor, this is their job, to make sure that all of this is choreographed as perfectly as possible.
Well, the thing that frustrated me is that this was in the planning for weeks to have that building
Yeah,
closed.
that's what I
Weeks.
mean.
It's not
It's
something
really
that
on the
happens
general,
overnight.
if-
They knew for weeks, and then, to go in there on a day and nobody's there,
Well, the general and the subcontractor had choice words over this, so I know, hopefully they've gotten it worked out.
All right, good. Okay, thank you for the update. Do you guys have anything else? Is there any unanticipated new business, Marlene? Or,
No.
Just remind everybody on the hockey game, Saturday,
Saturday night,
3:50th.
UMass hockey game, Hatfield night.
Hatfield night?
Hatfield
And
night.
did I
Got my tickets today.
get everything? Did I miss anything?
Sold out.
No,
Anything else?
All set, thank you.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a
Second.
motion's made and seconded? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, John.